Welcome to Blackman Folktales. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe. My wife cheated on me. But what I did next will shock you. The first months of marriage felt like stepping into a world where time stood still, and happiness stretched out like an endless horizon. I still remember the way my wife and I returned from our honeymoon, glowing with the kind of joy that no camera could capture. Every glance between us carried secrets, every laugh echoed with promise, and every night we spent together felt like a story unfolding with a perfect ending. We had traveled to a tropical island, where the sun melted into the ocean each evening, and I thought to myself countless times, this is it. This is forever. Coming back to our home, we carried that warmth into our daily lives. We decorated our kitchen with little souvenirs, filled the house with laughter, and moved as if nothing in the world could touch us. Every moment felt sacred, whether we were brushing our teeth side by side, whispering about dreams for our children, or holding hands while watching television. There was a certainty in my heart that I had found the love of my life, and nothing, absolutely nothing, could shake it. Or so I thought. The illusion of forever is a dangerous thing. It blinds you to shadows creeping in, to cracks forming beneath the surface. And so when the first sign came, I ignored it, brushing it off the way a man in love often does, thinking that trust could protect me from reality. That evening was so ordinary that I didn't recognize it as the turning point of my life. We were in the kitchen, cutting vegetables, joking about whose cooking was worse, when her phone lit up on the counter. A simple message. 4 words, how are you doing? My eyes scanned the sender's name, and my stomach tightened. It was her ex. My hand froze on the knife, and for a moment, I wasn't in that kitchen anymore. I was in a memory I never wanted to revisit, the knowledge that she once loved another man. But before suspicion could drown me, I showed her the phone. She laughed, carefree, and said, "He's a lunatic. He always tries to disturb me. Ignore him." The ease with which she brushed it aside settled me. I believed her. Because love, after all, thrives on trust, and in that moment, I thought trust was enough. Weeks passed, and the message became a forgotten whisper in my mind. Our lives returned to rhythm, morning kisses before work, evening meals together, weekend shopping trips where we argued over which couch pillows matched the curtains. But love, I would soon learn, can mask betrayal in its sweetest forms. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. At first, I didn't notice. A delayed laugh here. A distracted stare there. But little changes accumulate like dust, invisible until the sunlight hits. My wife began keeping her phone closer than ever before. She would place it face down on the table during dinner, something she never used to do. When it buzzed, she'd glance quickly, thumb flying across the screen, and return to our conversation as if nothing had happened. One night, while I was telling her about a stressful situation at work, she smiled suddenly, out of sync with my story. Her eyes flickered with a private amusement I wasn't part of, and my words died in my throat. I started noticing how she lingered in the bathroom longer than usual, her voice hushed as she spoke on the phone. Sometimes she claimed it was her mother. Other times, a colleague. But her tone was softer, sweeter, intimate in a way I hadn't heard directed at me in weeks. The distance between us grew, but it was disguised beneath small acts of affection. She still kissed me goodnight, but her lips were colder. She still asked about my day, but her mind was elsewhere. And in the silence between us, suspicion stirred like a storm on the horizon. Yet I refused to confront it, because confronting it meant admitting that the paradise I believed in might not be real. Instead, I told myself lies. I told myself she was stressed, that marriage was simply adjusting to routine, that work was draining her energy. I clung to excuses, desperate to preserve the illusion that we were unbreakable. But deep inside, my instincts clawed at me. Something was wrong. Terribly, irreversibly wrong. The truth revealed itself one night when she fell asleep on the couch, her phone still clutched loosely in her hand. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at it, torn between loyalty and suspicion. But curiosity is a beast, and once it sinks its teeth into you, it doesn't let go. My trembling fingers reached for the device, my breath shallow as I unlocked it with the password I once knew. What I found sent my world crashing down. Her messages weren't harmless greetings. They were long, intimate threads stretching back for weeks, filled with words that once belonged to me. "I miss you," she wrote. "I can't stop thinking about you," another read. There were voice notes, late-night confessions, memories they reminisced about, and worst of all, plans. Plans to meet, plans to share moments I thought were ours alone. I read her laughter through the screen, the way she responded with warmth and longing, the same warmth she had once reserved for me. My chest tightened, my hands shaking as the weight of betrayal sank in. The woman who promised me forever was already giving herself to another. I sat there, staring at the glowing screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even wake her. Instead, a silence settled over me, colder than any fury. Because in that moment, I knew anger would achieve nothing. Confrontation would give her excuses, maybe even tears, but no truth. No justice. And so I chose something else, something darker. A plan began forming in the back of my mind, a seed of vengeance cloaked in patience. I wouldn't expose her just yet. I wouldn't demand explanations or beg for honesty. No, I would bide my time. I would step into the shadows of their secret and use it against them. If she wanted to dance with the past, then I would be the silent witness to their betrayal. I would let her believe she was safe, let her ex think he had won, all while waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when that moment came, I would break not just the illusion of our marriage, but the very foundation of their deceit. Because sometimes, the worst thing a betrayed man can do isn't scream, it's smile, stay silent, and prepare. The days after discovering the messages were some of the longest of my life. Each morning, I woke up beside her, staring at the face I once adored, now tainted with betrayal. Her breaths were steady, her body curled into mine as if nothing had changed, but I knew better. I knew her heart was split between two men, and I had become the one living a lie. I moved carefully, deliberately, pretending not to notice the late-night text or the way she turned her phone screen away from me. Inside, my rage burned hotter with every passing moment, but I forced myself into silence. I smiled when she kissed me, laughed at her jokes, and nodded when she told me she was tired after work. To her, I was the same husband she had married. But beneath that mask, I was building a strategy. I replayed every word from their conversations in my head, memorized the places they mentioned, the times they planned to meet, the way she promised him secrets she once shared with me. My heart ached, my pride shattered, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I allowed her to believe she was in control, that her deception was flawless. What she didn't know was that every step she took deeper into betrayal was one step closer to my trap. I started to research her ex, digging into his life quietly, gathering pieces of who he was. And the more I learned, the clearer my plan became. I wasn't just going to confront them, I was going to infiltrate their world until neither of them could deny the truth staring them in the face. Her behavior grew bolder with time. She started leaving the house in clothes she never wore for me, shorter dresses, higher heels, brighter lipstick. She'd tell me she was meeting colleagues for dinner, but I already knew who she was running to. I let her go without question, my face calm, my voice supportive, while my mind churned with images of her in another man's arms. Every lie she told me was a blade to my chest, but I welcomed the pain, because it sharpened my resolve. One evening, as she claimed she had urgent work, I followed her discreetly, my car trailing hers from a distance. She drove to a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, where he was waiting. I sat in my car, engine off, watching from the shadows. The way she smiled at him tore through me, bright, genuine, filled with the spark she once reserved for me. They leaned in close, their heads nearly touching as they laughed, their hands brushing across the table. It felt like someone had pressed a knife into my ribs and twisted it slowly. But I didn't step out. Not yet. I watched until she left, memorizing every gesture, every look, every betrayal etched into their faces. When she finally came home hours later, her excuse was flawless, her performance Oscar-worthy. I kissed her goodnight, held her close, and whispered, "I love you." Inside, I was already gone. She just didn't know it yet. It was then I made my move. I created a new social profile under a carefully chosen alias, a man with no ties to me but one that seemed approachable. I reached out to her ex casually, pretending to admire something he had posted online. He responded quickly, arrogant and overly friendly, as if desperate for validation. Over the next few weeks, I built a rapport with him, masking my hatred behind casual conversation. I learned his patterns, his interests, his weaknesses. He bragged often, dropping hints about women he had conquered, never realizing I was the husband of one of them. Every word he typed was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but also another brick in the wall of my plan. Soon, I'd find myself laughing with him, even as bile rose in my throat. He thought he had gained a friend, someone to share his secrets with, while I was quietly tightening the noose. The irony was bitter, almost poetic. My wife was in love with a man who was foolish enough to open the door to his enemy. And I was patient enough to walk through it. The betrayal was deep, the wound unbearable, but my silence gave me power. And when the time came, I swore to myself, neither of them would see me coming. Living a double life was like standing on the edge of a blade, balancing between rage and composure. At home, I was the perfect husband, attentive and calm, never questioning her lies. I cooked dinner when she was late, massaged her shoulders when she claimed to be exhausted, kissed her forehead as she drifted to sleep. She had no idea that I already knew everything. In her eyes, I was still blinded by love, still the man who trusted her beyond reason. But in reality, I was gathering evidence, every small detail, every lie, every absence. My nights were spent scrolling through their messages, studying their patterns, and waiting. With her ex, I played the role of a curious friend, someone fascinated by his reckless charm. He reveled in the attention, feeding me stories of his exploits, sometimes even hinting at my wife without saying her name. His arrogance made my blood boil, but I smiled, responded with admiration, and asked questions that led him deeper into his own trap. It was a sick game, but one I had chosen to play. The deception was exhausting, but the satisfaction of knowing I was steps ahead kept me alive. The mask I wore was my greatest weapon, and as long as they believed I was oblivious, I held all the power. One night, I came home earlier than usual and found her on the balcony, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice low and trembling with laughter. She was speaking to him. I knew it instantly by the softness in her tone, the way she said his name with a fondness that twisted the knife in my heart. She didn't even notice me standing behind the curtain, watching her, memorizing every detail. When she hung up and came back inside, she jumped at the sight of me, her face flushing before she covered it with a smile. "Oh, I was just talking to my cousin," she said quickly, her voice slightly too high, too rehearsed. I kissed her cheek and nodded, pretending to believe her. Inside, my chest ached with betrayal, but I swallowed it down. That night, as she slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling for hours, the sound of her laughter with him replaying in my mind. The double life I was living was suffocating, but I couldn't stop. I needed to see how far she would go, how deep the betrayal ran. And the deeper it went, the colder I became. Love was fading, replaced by something sharper, something dangerous. I no longer longed for her affection, I longed for the moment when I would pull the ground from beneath their feet. Her ex grew comfortable with me, almost too comfortable. He invited me to meet up one evening, eager to impress me with his charm. I agreed, my hands shaking as I prepared to see him face to face. When I arrived, he greeted me like an old friend, laughing loudly, slapping me on the back, completely unaware of who I was. As we talked, I studied him, the smug grin, the casual arrogance, the way he spoke about women like trophies. He didn't know it, but every word he said fueled my contempt. He bragged about a woman he was seeing, describing her in vague terms but enough for me to know he meant my wife. My fist clenched beneath the table, my jaw tight, but I forced myself to laugh along, nodding like I admired him. If he suspected anything, he didn't show it. He was too blinded by his own ego, too convinced of his invincibility. When the night ended, he walked away thinking he had gained another loyal friend. What he didn't realize was that I had looked him in the eye, studied his weaknesses, and confirmed the truth with my own ears. My wife was his conquest, and I was his fool. Or so he thought. But the real fool was him, for opening his life to a man who would soon unravel it completely. By now, the weight of betrayal had become both poison and fuel. Every smile she gave me felt like a dagger, every kiss a mockery, yet I wore the mask flawlessly. I made her breakfast, held her hand in public, and even planned little surprises to keep her convinced I was the devoted husband. She had no idea that every gesture was calculated, every kind word rehearsed. Behind my calm exterior, I was watching her unravel piece by piece. She thought she was clever, sneaking out with excuses of overtime and girls' nights, but I tracked her without fail. I knew the route she took, the clothes she wore, the time she lied. I became a ghost in her shadow, silently documenting the crumbling of our vows. And with her ex, I tightened the bond. He confided in me more than ever, sending pictures of his nights out, boasting about the women he had charmed. Once again, he hinted at her, calling her the special one who gave him more than the others ever had. My rage simmered, but I smothered it beneath the surface, feeding his arrogance with laughter and fake admiration. Every day, I grew colder, harder, less human. I was no longer her husband, I was her executioner in waiting. The moment came when they planned another meeting. Through their messages, I knew the place, the time, the lies she would tell me. She claimed she had a work dinner, kissed me on the cheek, and left in a dress I had never seen before. I followed her silently, my car trailing hers at a safe distance until she parked outside a hotel. My chest tightened, my breath uneven, as I watched her step inside, her heels clicking like a death march. Minutes later, he arrived, swaggering with the confidence of a man who thought the world belonged to him. They disappeared inside together, and for a moment, I considered storming in, ending it right there. But I stopped myself. Not yet. This wasn't the climax. This was another layer of evidence, another brick in the fortress I was building around them. I sat in my car for hours, my fist clenched on the steering wheel, imagining what was happening inside. The pain was unbearable, a searing burn in my chest, but I endured it. Because when I confronted them, I didn't want denial. I wanted silence. The kind of silence that only comes when the guilty are caught with no escape. When she returned home that night, she found me asleep on the couch, or at least pretending to be. She kissed my forehead softly, guilt hidden behind affection, then slipped into the bedroom. I opened my eyes in the darkness, my chest hollow, my heart no longer breaking but hardening into stone. That night, I finalized my plan. No more waiting. No more patience. The trap was set, and soon, I would spring it. But instead of confronting her in anger, I wanted precision. I wanted to pull the rug from beneath both of them at once, to stand before them not as the fool they believed I was but as the man who had seen everything, known everything, and prepared everything. I imagined their faces, hers pale with shock, his arrogance collapsing into fear, and it fueled me. The betrayal had destroyed me, but it had also forged me into something else. Something colder, sharper, unstoppable. The man she married was gone. What remained was someone neither of them was ready to meet. The night I decided to end the charade, the air itself felt heavier. It was as though the universe had been waiting for this moment, the moment when truth would finally rip through the fabric of lies that had been carefully woven around me. I woke up early, rehearsing the role I was about to play. I smiled when she stood beside me, kissed her softly as though my heart wasn't already shattered into pieces. Have a good day, darling, she said, her voice laced with sweetness that felt more like venom now. I nodded, holding back the bitter laugh that threatened to escape. She had no idea what awaited her. That evening, she put on her usual act, rushed excuses about a business dinner, exaggerated sighs about how work was draining her. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, her eyes avoiding mine for just a fraction of a second too long. I watched her leave, calm and composed, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. The mask she wore was flawless, but so was mine. Minutes later, I was in my car, following her again, the headlights cutting through the darkness as if leading me to destiny. She didn't know that I already knew where she was going, who she was going to meet, and what they were going to do. This wasn't another reconnaissance mission. Tonight, I wasn't a silent witness. Tonight, I would step into their secret world and burn it down from the inside. I followed her to the same hotel I had watched from the shadows before, the same place where betrayal hid behind closed doors. She walked in confidently, her heels echoing with the rhythm of deceit. I waited until he arrived, swaggering with that arrogant smile plastered across his face, utterly oblivious to the storm gathering around him. I let them settle in before I made my move. With calm precision, I walked into the hotel, my steps steady despite the tempest raging inside me. The receptionist barely noticed me, and within minutes, I found the room. My hand trembled on the door handle, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the moment. I had rehearsed this in my mind countless times, but reality was far heavier than imagination. I turned the handle slowly, quietly, and pushed the door open. The sight that greeted me was the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. They were together, lost in each other, laughing, whispering, touching. The woman who vowed to love me forever sat there glowing with a joy she no longer shared with me, and the man who had infiltrated my marriage looked at her like she was his prize. When they noticed me, silence filled the room instantly. Her face drained of color, her lips parting in horror. He froze, his arrogance cracking for the first time. I stepped inside, shutting the door behind me, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. My voice was calm, too calm, like the stillness before a storm. Why? I asked her, my eyes fixed on the woman who had once been my everything. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Tears welled up in her eyes, her body trembling as she tried to form an explanation that didn't exist. I turned to him, his smirk fading as he tried to stand tall, pretending he wasn't afraid. And you? I asked. He shifted uncomfortably, his bravado crumbling. Neither of them could give me the satisfaction of an answer. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. I pulled my phone from my pocket, showing them both the messages, the evidence, the photos I had taken. Her tears turned into sobs, but I felt nothing. No pity, no compassion. Only emptiness. You built your world on lies, I said coldly, and you thought I was too blind to see. But I saw everything. I know everything. She reached out for me then, her voice breaking as she whispered my name, begging for forgiveness, pleading that it was a mistake. I stepped back, my face hard. Forgiveness was a luxury I no longer had. I looked at them both, my heart heavy with finality. Enjoy each other, I whispered, my voice laced with venom. You've destroyed me, but you've also freed me. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving them frozen in their shame. Behind me, I could hear her sobbing, calling out to me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. Because the man she had betrayed no longer existed. I was someone else now. Someone forged in the fire of betrayal, colder and stronger than before. Walking out of that hotel felt like walking out of my old life. The cool night air hit my face, but instead of relief, I felt a hollowness that stretched deep into my bones. Betrayal had stripped me bare, and all that was left was silence. I drove through the city streets, the lights blurring past me, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. My mind replayed every moment of our marriage, the laughter, the whispered dreams, the promises of forever. Each memory felt like a cruel joke now, a story written in lies. The weight of what I had seen pressed down on me, yet strangely, I didn't feel anger anymore. The rage had burned itself out, leaving only ashes. All I felt was finality, an acceptance that the chapter of my life with her was over. By the time I reached home, I knew what I had to do. I packed my things quietly, methodically, refusing to leave behind anything that tethered me to her. The wedding photos on the wall mocked me, her smiling face frozen in time beside mine. I took them down, one by one, not out of hate, but out of necessity. This house was no longer a home, it was a graveyard of broken promises. She came back hours later, her face swollen from crying, her voice trembling as she called out my name. I sat at the dining table, a suitcase by my side, waiting. When she saw me, her body crumpled, and she rushed forward, falling to her knees, grabbing my hands desperately. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Please don't leave. It was a mistake. I was weak. I don't love him, I love you. I'll end it, I swear." Her words spilled out frantically, but they felt empty. She had already crossed the line, destroyed the sacred bond we had built. Love is built on trust, and once that trust is shattered, no amount of apologies can piece it back together. I looked down at her, the woman I once would have died for, and felt nothing but a cold detachment. "You didn't make a mistake," I said quietly. "You made a choice. And now, I'm making mine." She sobbed harder, clinging to me, but I gently pulled my hands away. "I asked you why, and you couldn't answer." That silence told me everything I needed to know. Her cries echoed through the house, but I stood firm. I picked up my suitcase, walked to the door, and paused only once. "Goodbye," I whispered. And then I left, not looking back, not hesitating. For the first time in weeks, I felt free. Life after betrayal is not easy. The scars don't fade overnight, and the memories haunt you when you least expect them. But walking away from her was the only way to save myself. In the weeks that followed, I moved into a small apartment, away from the ghost of our marriage. The nights were long, the silence deafening, but slowly, I began to rebuild. Friends reached out, family offered support, but I kept most of it inside, choosing solitude over pity. Sometimes, I thought about her, wondered if she was still with him, if their affair survived the weight of exposure. But those thoughts no longer consumed me. I had already buried that part of my life. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the rain fall, I realized something profound. Betrayal had broken me, yes, but it had also remade me. I had walked through fire and emerged stronger, sharper, unshakable. The man who once believed blindly in love was gone. In his place was someone who understood the fragility of trust, the darkness that hides behind smiles, the danger of illusions. And though my marriage had ended in ruins, my story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.